better daily, where we work hard in our minds, bodies, and our spirits to become 1% better every single day. Download the app and join our Betterment family at betterdaily.live to catch the video version of these podcasts. Here's your host and my dad, Alex Van Houten.
What's up, Betterment family? This is Alex Van Houten in Better Daily Live. Happy Thursday. I'm super excited about Word Thursday today because the word is Abraham. I know it's a name, but it has such a cool etymology, and I'm excited to dive into that with you. Before I get there, we've got two things. First, happy 26th day of the Faithful 40 Challenge. I've got a run planned. What are you up to? I'd really love to hear what you're going to be doing over the next 14 days to finish this Faithful 40 Challenge strong. And I have new incentive. I have put on the calendar my wife and my 7th anniversary. Well, I didn't put that on the calendar. That's on the calendar. But we put our trip on the calendar. And so I've got to look, extra snazzy and beautiful. I'm just kidding. I don't know if it gets any better than this. So sorry, wifey. She knew when she married me that I was going to age like a fine wine. That's what she knew. So anyway, I'm very excited about that. I hope that you guys continue the momentum and continue working hard to make this Faithful 40 Challenge powerful and good. We are on the back end, the last half, almost the last 2/3. So hang with it. And second, I'm going to do our Wednesday recap around lunchtime today. So you have until lunchtime to submit your Wednesday submission and tell us what it is that you won at this week so we can high five you and celebrate with you. We've had several awesome wins recorded, and I'll send out a notification and stuff to remind everybody just in case there's other wins you want recorded, because I'm going to shout them out, talk about them a bit, and I'm really looking forward to that. So Word Thursday, we're talking about Abraham. Abraham is such a cool, awesome character and story in the Bible. If you're unfamiliar with Abraham, he appears in Genesis chapter 12, and he gets a lot of airtime. He gets about 10 chapters of Genesis before transitioning to the rest of the story, Isaac, and then later Jacob, who becomes Israel. And then that leads us into the Exodus story of the Hebrews getting their freedom from Egypt. And so Abraham is the father of the faith. When Moses writes to the Israelites in Exodus, he's talking about the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. And so it's through Abraham's story that God really reveals himself and his character and how he interacts with a man. And I love Abraham's story because Abraham is not a perfect man. If you read through Genesis, you would think that the hero of the faith, so to speak, the one who God chooses to whip into shape, so to speak, and to make covenants with and stuff, you'd think, he's got the full armor on and he's a perfect man and he does what he needs to do. Like, no, not at all. Not Abraham. Abraham is, and I don't mean any disrespect, Abraham, if you're listening, but Abraham starts out his story not in particularly auspicious straits. And pertinent to the story, he starts out, his name is Abram, Abram, which means the great father, which is really interesting because when we pick up his story in Genesis chapter 12, he's actually in his early to mid 70s by most accounts. And what's interesting about that is he doesn't have kids yet. His wife's really old. She doesn't have kids yet. And they still live in his dad's house. And so God's call to Abraham is, get thee up out of thy father's house to a land that I will show you. And so Abraham, or Abram at the time, the great father, is not really a great father at all. He's not living up to his name. He's not living up to his birth expectation to be a great father. And he's got this like itch inside, this call to adventure, because he's been hanging out in his dad's house for like 70 years. I don't know about you, but I don't know what kind of man you have to be stuck in the basement for 70 years. Maybe not in the basement. Maybe he was working his father's land. Anyway, God says, get up and go. Well, Abram doesn't know what all this journey is going to have in store for him, but he does get up and go, and he takes a step of faith. And that is a really interesting thing in Abram's story, because throughout his story, there is always that next step of faith, no matter what's going on. That's the thing. Abram's not perfect, but he continues to walk in faith. And you see through Abram's story, the more God calls him, the closer he walks, and the more his faith grows. And that is what God establishes a covenant with in Abram's story. There's a really, really powerful verse that's referenced in the New Testament, actually. I want to say it's in Genesis chapter 15, when God makes a promise to Abraham about the children that he will have. Because, Abraham's old. He doesn't have children. He's childless, right? And he gets up out of his father's house to a land God shows him. He ends up in Egypt with a famine. He lies about his wife being his sister so, that Pharaoh doesn't treat him harshly and try to steal his wife. And then actually ends up out of that lie becoming rich. And then he's got the mo money, mo problem thing when he and Lot don't really get along. Well, he and Lot are fine, but they've got too much stuff. Their goats are intermingling on the pasture and their slaves are fighting, and it's not good. And so Abram is generous and lets Lot make a choice about where he wants to be. He settles closer to Sodom. Not good, by the way. Turns out to be a bad deal later for him in the story. But either way, then it says, Abram believed God, and it was counted unto him as righteousness. That's a very, very powerful and interesting verse. In fact, later in the New Testament, several people struggle with that verse to try to make sense of what it means to believe God. And for that to somehow stand in the gap for being imperfect, to stand in the gap for being righteous. And now it's really interesting to note, Abram didn't have a Bible. Like his journey with God was a personal relationship with God. It was one step at a time, one day at a time. There was nothing informing his process. In fact, by most accounts, it was an oral tradition that passed on Abram's story. And it was Moses who originally wrote it down. So Abram didn't have anything informing his process with God. It was a day by day step of faith in a positive direction until one day God makes a covenant with Abram and he changes his name to Abraham, which is really, really wild, right? Because in the Bible it says, and we will call you Abraham, the father of many nations. And I thought that meant he went from being called the great father, that's what Abram means, to being called the father of many nations, Abraham. That would make sense, right? Because that's God's promise to Abraham, is that he will have as many children as there are stars in the sky. His wife doesn't believe him. She thinks that's crazy, even though she's pretty, she's a beautiful but old lady. And well, she thinks this is all kind of silly and weird. And there's some things she does to try to take this covenant into her own hands. But the name change from Abram to Abraham, it's not the great father to the father of many nations, which would make sense, but that's not what it means. Abraham actually means the protector, the shield. And what I think is powerful about that, and what I hope to get at for you on this Word Thursday, is Abram was not living up to his name, Great Father. Through many, many steps of faith and getting closer and closer in his walk with God, even though he didn't really have a process to inform him, this is God revealing himself to him through covenants. But through those steps of faith, through famine, through confusion, through promises and difficulty, then there's this moment where Abraham's defining characteristic, what he's called by his name, is no longer the great father. Now it's the protector, the shield. Well, what does that mean? Abram's faith, and later becoming Abraham, forms a shield, a protection for the future of his family. And so the father of many nations is the protector of the next generation. And where the rubber meets the road is where we take steps of faith every single day, and how that's not just for us. Sure, the 1% better journey does improve you, and I hope it improves your health. I hope it reduces your pain. I hope it brings you more joy, teaches you patience and endurance. I hope that all of the ways that you could be better is fruit that you see in the mirror, is fruit that you feel inside in your spirit and in your mind. I hope that for you. But I also want you to recognize that as you are progressing in this journey, just like Abraham taking a step of faith every day, as you're progressing in this journey, you are also becoming a benefit to the people around you, just by virtue of the fact that you're moving forward. That's something that happens in this group on a regular basis. And that's something we celebrate in the Faithful 40 Challenge. When we are vocal about the steps that we're taking every day, even if they're difficult. And I don't just mean steps. I don't just mean your 10,000 steps a day. I mean, when we're vocal about our cardiovascular exercise, and we're vocal about our weight training, and when we're vocal about our nutrition, and we're vocal about our prayers, and we're vocal about the reflections that we have, and we say, look, these are the steps that I'm taking. What's cool is that's edifying to everybody around us. It's protecting of the positive mindset that we can have in the world and the positive influence we can have in our circles, rather than us getting down on a regular basis. To make this more real, my sister Jessie will post pretty frequently in the group about, hey, it's been rough lately. I've been kind of down. I've been kind of depressed. She went through an illness recently and she had to recover from surgery. Sorry, Jess, hope you don't mind me telling everybody that. I think you said that in the group. I think it's public knowledge. But anyway, so she'll post to something like, I didn't feel like it, but I did it. Sometimes that's all that matters. In fact, sometimes that's what matters. And I know for a fact, I have clients who tell me that they'll read that and go, yep, I know I don't feel like doing this. Yep, I know I'm in a rough spot right now, but I'm going to do it anyway because Jessie did it. And how often is that something we miss? How often is it that we don't realize the impact that we have on the lives of other people? That's something Abraham knew in his story. That's something Abraham was acutely aware of. And I wonder often if that's one of the reasons that God chose Abraham. Abraham knew that what he was doing was of significance, not just for him and his family, but for everybody. That was God's promise to him, that he will have many children and that the world through him would be blessed. And that's my prayer for you today on Word Thursday. My prayer for you is that your step of faith every day is a blessing to those around you, that you make a positive and powerful impact because you are doing your darndest to believe God, to believe that he has a good path set in front of you, that he has made you for such a time as this, and that even in your difficulty, that there is amazing things in store. And that if you keep walking in faith, if you'll keep taking a step, even if it's difficult, even when there's famine, and even when there's promises that don't seem like they can possibly be there, and even when you might not have the support of the people closest to you. That was Abraham and Sarah. She straight up laughed in his face when the angels, well, the men who came, but turns out they were angels, when the men who came said, yes, your wife will conceive and bear a son. And she's like, you guys are crazy. She didn't believe, but Abram believed. And God counted it to him as righteousness. I hope that the faith of Abraham, the shield, the protector, I hope that that's something that you get to carry with you this week. Guys, this has been Alex Van Houten in Better Daily Live. Thank you so much for joining me on Word Thursday. And stay tuned today for a recap of Wednesday. I'm looking forward to it. Until next time, it's just 1%. You got this.
Thank you for joining us for 1% Better today. Don't forget to subscribe for the podcast. Leave us a raving review to tell others how Better Daily has helped you in your journey. If you want more Better Daily, download our app and join our Betterment family at betterdaily.live. Use code POD to get 25% off your subscription. That's POD, all caps, to save 25% on your subscription. We all have a cross to carry. It's lighter when we do it together. Go to betterdaily.live today.